Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Eggfield Coach. I'm Mia, and this is Alberto, your business coach. Today, we're going to talk about a powerful succession strategy for business owners, employee ownership. I know that Alberto is particularly very passionate about this topic, so we're going to pick his brain today. Alberto, what exactly is employee ownership?
Thank you, Mia. Employee ownership, in a way, it's about ensuring legacy. It can come in many forms, but in a nutshell, essentially is having the opportunity for employees to own shares of your company and have a exit strategy for the owner of the company. It's in a way marrying and giving back to the ones that helped you build the company, and at the same time giving the owner a way to transition from the founder perspective to investor perspective, which is the expected career trajectory of what founders should be aiming for as we've been going through our courses.
So it's about entrusting your life's work to the people who helped you build it.
Exactly. It's about ensuring that culture, that essence, what makes the company successful. We all know that it's all about the people, right? And so to ensure that goes over legacies and periods and there's a bright future, you ensure that's intact. And sometimes it's even more important than maximizing sale price.
And what are the key benefits for a business owner deciding to go into this path?
There's several key benefits. The first one is, let's say, financial. It is a way for the founder to capitalize on all the work that it was put. So there's several tax advantages into that. But at the same time, if you're negotiating the sale of your company to someone that's coming in to, let's say, do a roll up, for instance, how many of those jobs that you created are going to get cut? You don't know how many people that have been with you for 10, 20, 30, 50 years. And suddenly for operation efficiency of these two companies merging, some of your collaborators might find themselves without a job. So in a way, to an owner, to ensure that the employees are taken care of, it's ensuring that there's an exit opportunity. It's a way to capitalize. And then I would say the most important is not to be hostage to, let's say, any takeover perspective. When you're negotiating the sale of your company on their table, you don't want to be in a position where you have no alternative. Sometimes, most of the times, there's only one buyer in the table and they say, here's my price, take or leave it. In that scenario, you always want to understand what's your plan B, and then whether selling to employees is a plan B or a plan A, regardless, it gives you options. And in that way, you can always go relaxed and not be extremely anxious about getting the deal done in a way that's not great for anybody.
So it's a win-win in many ways. And what about employees? What do they gain from this?
It is about pride, right? A company to be successful, it's really about how much the employees care about the business. If you're working with delivery and if your employees don't care about the trucks that they drive, they'll go at a faster speed on bumps, which will destroy the average use of that truck from, let's say, 10 years to 2 years. And every 2 years, you got to change that truck. And then employees could say, well, it's just the truck is not ideal. And so the cost of business can go up. But if you provide, let's say, that ownership to the employees, in a way, everyone feels like they're part of the whole system, like they belong, and they're harvesting the fruits of their own labor. And so people care more. And in a way, that is the secret recipe for success in every company. It's almost hilarious to what Elon Musk is doing. The reason why America does not run successfully is just because people don't care enough.
Sounds like it can transform the employee experience.
Correct.
Does the employer ownership impact the company itself?
It does. It goes back to our story. If you care enough, that can be translated into, financially speaking, higher retention rates for employees, better performance, problems could be solved faster, and ultimately the overall profitability of the company is most often we think to be much positive than if it's not an employee-owned company.
And that resilience is so important in today's world.
It creates resilience into the company because when you have that sense of entitlement, the sense of ownership, you will not jump ship in the first sight of challenging. So there's many stories that we've heard about employees willing to take a pay cut so that no one's fired and then the company can keep moving forward. During COVID, we heard that employees that were really aligned and incentivized and really caring about where their company was going, and then suddenly you had a major market forces that forced the company to reassess whether we fire half of our workforce because we can't provide for payroll, or do we decrease payroll for a couple of months or a year so that no one loses their job. Most companies that really were engaged had better success when their employees cared and say, hey, I don't want to fire my collaborators as well, so let's reduce. And then you create that resilience. And that's more likely to happen when you have an employee-owned company.
You mentioned there are different forms of employee ownership. Can you specify them?
Yes, we can simplify employee ownership by having employees to own stock or parts of the company. And on average, there's 3 ways we can do it. We can do it with employee stock ownership, we can do it with employee trusts, and we can do with workers' cooperatives. Employee stock options ownership is almost like a retirement fund. Think like part of your 401k, give or take. It's almost like you reinvest your retirement funds into the company instead of buying an SP 500 ETF. You're buying into your own company. It's an easier way to understand how employees contribute or buy the ownership of the company, is transferring their retirement funds from traditional markets into the company. So obviously that creates a lot of tax advantages, not only for the founder who's selling, but also the employee that is acquiring, because you get tax deferred. So you only pay taxes when you actually realize that transaction. Workers' cooperative essentially is changing the governance behind the whole way of how you manage the company. So now you have almost a task force that's owned by the workforce, the collaborators, to actually go and sit at the board meetings to really understand how the company is working. Traditionally, you have one founder, which is a CEO, and he makes all the decisions of how the company is going forward. But with the cooperative, now you have representatives of every single department unit of the workforce. So to summarize, essentially the workers' cooperative is not just only owning pieces of the company from a financial perspective like shares, but also owning part of that governance, like being part of the way that the company makes decisions and how the strategy goes forward. And take a notch up, essentially, when you talk about trusts, it's similar. You own the financial gains, you own about the governance, but also the trust essentially is an entity itself. So then it's not just because this employee retired and then the shares are gone. The trust is an entity that perpetuates and will pay dividends to the trustee. So you don't actually own shares, and the trust is its own entity.
And with these different structures, how a business find the right one?
I would say number one, seek guidance. There's several key factors that you want to consider, not just from a mission perspective or evaluation perspective or the outcome, but is really having a deep consideration about is the readiness of the company to take the cover and the governance behind. On paper, it sounds great that you could have additional governance from the workforce. But what if no one really cares or understands, or they're not ready to make business decisions? So then, in a way, democracy in business doesn't go hand to hand. It's not because your perspective or you should be heard that's what's going to ensure the growth of the company. Because a business is a self-entity with a lot of personal desires, and sometimes when you want to maximize, let's say, your salary, that doesn't really help with where the company is going, right? Because sometimes a company has to invest more into a different business, in a different model, and to ensure that there's continuity in the business. And sometimes that role that you're doing, it could die in the next 5 years. It's not uncommon to see that, just like your career 10 years ago, 20 years ago, being a model was like the way that companies would do to promote their businesses. But right now, with access to social media, the work model is being replaced to influencers. And so is modeling a role within companies that are dying. And in that sense, there's these little details that you have to consider to understand how do you actually structure the company for this employee transition. But there's some very cool stuff that it's very unique to employer ownership. Traditionally speaking, when you do a leverage buyout, which means you go to a bank, you take a loan and use the loan to buy the business. That's something that could be done. Even when you buy a house, you loan money from a bank. There's two parts to a loan. That's a part what's called principal, which is the actual amount that you're loaned out. And there's a part which is called interest, which is the money that you pay back to whoever loaned you the money. On average, principal is never tax deductible, which means that whatever money you make, you have to repay this, but you also have to pay taxes based on that money that you're repaying. But interest is the only thing that's tax deductible. But on an employee stock ownership ESOP perspective, the principal can actually be a tax deduction to the business, which is something that's unheard of. The impact is you create more flexibility to your employees to have access to that ownership, because then the business is paying for that. It's a true acquisition cost. It's not really taking out of the pockets of anybody. And a very known ESOP type of business is Publix. When you look here at South Florida, you have Winn-Dixie, you have Walmart, and you have Publix. Publix grew on an unprecedented level because everyone that works at Publix is like investor and owner at Publix. And if you look at from a consumer perspective, when you go to Walmart, when you go to Winn-Dixie, and when you're going to Publix, your experience is different. And so to answer your question is, seek guidance, and we have success cases to measure how ESOPs really change the growth of a company. And there are definitely ways to help the founders that are looking to get this structure that they can get a fair valuation. They can help their employees to feel like they belong and reward everyone else that's being part of that journey.
This has been incredibly insightful. And now what's the biggest takeaway for our viewers?
When you're ready to transition from a founder to investor, consider employee ownership. It's, in my perspective, one of the best ways to align mission, give appreciation to the people that have been with your journey, not be held hostage and abandoned that you are being forced to do, and you don't really understand whether the company is going to grow or it's going to be shrink down just because your competitors are feeling threatened by the work that you've been doing. So it's ultimately a win-win solution from the founder transition to investor perspective to the employees that believe in the company since the beginning and ensuring that legacy continues.
Alberto, thank you for sharing your expertise with us today. And how can we find out more about your coaching business?
So follow and subscribe us, hit that notification bell. If you have questions, put in the comment section. We're going to do our best to answer. And if you're looking for some direct guidance, send us a message on our email and let's get to work.
We cannot wait to hear from you. Thank you for watching us, and we'll see you in the next one.